Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for November 1st through 7th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 3 shows, I watched 2 movies, and I listened to 1 book. Our first book is a standalone novella, and that's To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This concerns 4 people that have been sent on a space mission, and they are basically going to different places to catalog what they can from those planets. These are planets where people have never been before, but they know that they can land there with the ship that they have and basically spend years there cataloging whatever they find. They are able to do this because while they are in transit between planet and planet and planet, they go into this kind of stasis where their body ages very, very slowly. And one of the most fascinating parts of this book is actually the process of them coming out of that and all of the medical things that they have to do and how looking at yourself after you've aged, even though it's a blink of an eye to you, is very strange. And then the other fascinating part is obviously them visiting these different worlds and what happens on them. I also really love the relationships between these characters. They obviously have to be very tight-knit. They are spending literally years with just the 4 of them. And within that, we have so much queer representation. We have a character who presents as Aro Ace, we have a trans character, we have a character who must be bi or pan because she occasionally sleeps with one of the women in the crew and one of the men in the crew. And at no point does that cause any infighting or tension, it just is. Since this is a very short novella, I'm not going to talk any more about the plot of it because I want you to go into it not knowing anything, because that's how I like to go into things. Just know this adventure they go on is very interesting and that I was very intrigued by the ending. Next this week I read Trans Wizard Harriet Porber and the Bad Boy Parasaurolophus. Yes, that title is a mouthful. This book concerns Harriet, who is a wizard. She had the best-selling spell 3 years ago, but her agent is concerned that the company that she works for is going to drop her because she hasn't written a new spell recently that is anywhere near intriguing. Thinking that Harriet just needs a change of scenery, she takes her from Brooklyn and sends her to a small island off the coast of England where she is meant to write her next spell. When she's there, she has a run-in with Bad Boy Snape, and things go from there. I had never read any Chuck Tingle before this, and I thought that this was honestly going to just be silly and like badly written fanfiction maybe. I don't know, that's kind of the impression you get from this cover. His covers are all delightfully horrible, by the way, and I appreciate that. However, I ended up really loving this story. 1, because it was meta-theatrical. Snape uses meta-magic. Basically, he knows he's the bad boy in a romance novel, so he knows that he has to treat her like crap at the beginning, and he has to do some toxic masculinity things, and he has to be a billionaire bad boy because you can't just be a bad boy, you have to have the author write in some wealth for you. Another obvious reason I love this is because of the big middle finger it gives to a certain writer who wrote about a certain different wizard. And you see that middle finger throughout this book, and that is great. The biggest surprise, however, is you could have taken that element completely out of this, and this was a great book on its own, and then you add in all of these references that obviously we are all going to get a kick out of. I actually did a spectacular standalones video for this vlog, which will be going live tomorrow, so if you're watching this on the day it's posted, you just have to wait till tomorrow morning, and then you can watch me read it chapter by chapter and give my thoughts. On to what I watched this week, the first thing being we finished The Man in the High Castle. I thought we were just finishing the 4th season, but that's just the end, and also the show just ends, and I don't know how to feel about it. That's basically all I can say, because it's the end of the 4th season and the end of the show, but what the hell was that? We also finished the 2nd season of Fargo and then watched the entire 3rd season of Fargo. One of the reasons we got into this show is because we knew that Ewan McGregor was in the 3rd season, and I love Ewan McGregor, and not only is he in the 3rd season, he plays 2 different characters. There is also a character that returns really late in this season who is actually technically in all 3 seasons and is the only character to do that, which I found really cool, especially because this character in the show is deaf and is also played by a deaf actor. If you've never seen Fargo before, I definitely suggest this show. Every season is a different time frame and different characters. And if not different characters, then different actors, because there is some overlap, but you'll see a character who's much younger than you saw them before, and it's played by a different actor, and it's just really well put together. The other show we watched the entire 1st season of is Truth Seekers. We were sitting down, we were going to watch Man in the High Castle, a Prime ad played, which is always annoying, but they only take a few seconds, it's fine. But this was the first time that there was an ad for something we didn't already know about and desperately wanted to watch, which is this show. All we saw was there was a TV show starring Nick Frost, and we were in. That's all we needed to know. Truth Seekers is about a man named Gus who works for a company named Smile in the UK. Basically, he installs the internet internet around the UK. But as a hobby, he's basically a ghost hunter with a YouTube channel. Something happened with his old installation partner, so he gets a new partner and they go on adventures, and it is great. There was at least one big joke that I saw coming and I called it, but that did not detract from my enjoyment of this. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it was a pretty solid show, and I'd be really interested to see where it goes from that ending. Since we had finished off all the shows we were watching, we switched to movies, the first one being Demolition Man. This is a Sylvester Stallone flick that I had never heard of before, but both my roommates love. This film is from 1993, and it's set in a dystopian 1996 where there's just crime all over Los Angeles, and it's terrible, and commercial flights aren't even allowed to land there, and he's put right down in the middle of this situation and basically has to stop the bad guys, as you do. But he's called the Demolition Man because things tend to blow up around him, and that definitely happens in this opening scene when he's fighting Wesley Snipes. As his punishment for unintentionally killing a bunch of bystanders, who I am convinced were already dead when the explosion went off, but that's beside the point, he is cryogenically frozen and eventually will come out of that once he's served his time. However, when we get to August 3rd, 2032, the guy that also was cryogenically frozen because he was caught has been unfrozen and goes on a spree, and they kind of figured they have to thaw him out to stop this bad guy. He's now in a future where anything bad for you is illegal, so you can't swear. If you swear, you get a citation that comes over the speakers, which was really funny because obviously there was lots of swearing and you would just hear a citation sound in the background every time, which was fun. There were also a lot of familiar faces in this, and if you've never seen it before, I highly suggest it because it knows it's a cheesy action flick. It makes references to things that are hilarious. It calls some things, which is just, you know, prophetic, like movies sometimes happen to be. And once we finished that, I decided that we needed more Wesley Snipes in our life, so I got my roommates to watch To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. If you've never seen this classic drag queen or road trip movie, I don't know why you're not just flicking over to that right now, because it is a lot of fun. Our three lead characters are played by Wesley Snipes, Patrick Swayze, and John Leguizamo, and they're all in drag the entire time. The first two tie a drag competition, and they are being sent from New York to Hollywood to compete in basically the finals of another drag competition, but they decide that they want to take this other person with them, so they cash in their plane tickets, buy a car, and are driving across the country when some shenanigans ensue. Is this movie absolutely perfect by today's standards? No. Is it also a heartwarming and just a wonderful story of a town coming together and these people just changing the lives of a very small town in a very short amount of time? Yeah, it is that, and I really loved it. I also hadn't seen it in over a decade, so it was very nice to go back to it. The book I listened to this week was The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This is a nonfiction book about the girls who were tasked with painting the dials on watches so they would be luminescent, and they were mostly used overseas in the First World War, and then eventually they would have been used in the Second World War. However, a lot happened to make that stop, and that's basically the bulk of this book. In this book, we follow several different women who work for various different corporations that were using radium as a luminous paint, and we find out the health complications they got because of that. Back in the 1910s and the 1920s, people thought radium was perfectly great for you. They actually thought it gave you health benefits, so women working with radium didn't think twice when they were told to take their paintbrushes, dip it in the luminous paint, use their mouths to point the brushes. They would be nice and fine and they could get the tiny little numbers on the tiny little dials, and then repeat that process over and over and over again. In fact, if they had extra paint at the end of the day, they would paint their jewelry and clothing with it, so when they walked home at night, they would be this luminous, glowing being just walking down the street. They were paid pretty well for this job, so they were it girls. People really wanted to work in these factories because if you were quick, because you were paid by the dial, not by the hour, then you could really bring in a lot of money for your family. However, as we know now, radium is not good for you. It is radioactive, it will destroy your body, and that happened to far too many women. However, many of the women it happened to stood up for themselves and actually got laws changed because they were advocating for themselves and getting professional help to do so as well, and this was just a really well put together book. This is narrative nonfiction at its best because the author not only went and interviewed people that knew all of these radium girls, but she also had access to their diaries, so could put in little details from their friends, their family, from what they actually wrote down when they were alive, and some of them were still living at this point, so she was able to conduct all of these interviews and get all of these details that made this very, very rich and such an interesting picture of the world and how evil corporations could be, because even though these corporations knew for a fact that radium wasn't good for you, they would just flat out lie. They would have people change autopsy reports so that they could just keep making money on these luminous watches. It is a horrific subject matter, but I am very glad that I finally picked this book up for Nonfiction November. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you're here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I recently set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as the link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist, in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!